When did you discover that Ghana, Nigeria, was not developed? And how did you come to that realization? There was something about health, and you are in nursing. When you go to the doctor, there's something interesting they always ask you. Hey, doc, I'm having a toothache. They ask you, when did it start, right? Because it helps the doctor to know how to. So if you say, oh, just 2 weeks ago, it would be a different approach he would use. How about if you told him, I was born with it? There'll be a different approach. So you know you're not well because yesterday, day before, you were healthy, you had appetite. You woke up this morning, you don't have appetite, you're not feeling well. So you tell the doctor, I am not well, because you knew. So when did you discover that Nigeria or Ghana was not developed?
When did we discover?
Yes. How did you know? When? The when is important.
It would be when I came here for school, when I discovered myself rather than being told in school. Because I was told in school when I was in Ghana that, we're a third world country, we're underdeveloped compared to the other,
So when did you know that your country was not developed?
Coming here, I would say.
How about you?
I would say same with me because I was raised in Nigeria and I didn't see anything wrong. I guess I was young, but I didn't see myself struggling.
That's correct.
So then when I came here, it's I saw a huge difference, with regards to health and things and school education, things like that.
Very good. All right. Now let's dive into what is the real meat of this discussion. What do Nigerians have in common with white Americans, the WASP who founded this country? Except both of them being human beings. What do they have in common?
I mean, there are people that have innovation.
No. What do they have in common with Nigerians?
Physically?
Yes. Besides being human beings, the environment, culture, history, what do they have in common with Nigerians or Ghanaians? Or let's start using the word Africans. What do they have in common?
Hi, I'm Joe Delaney. Today we're going to talk about what's the fastest way to get to a 10% body fat and still look and feel okay.
Nothing.
Can't think of it.
So you see what you have done. So if there was no country on earth, but Africa is the only continent on earth, would you still call it a third world country? No. Then Nigeria would not be underdeveloped. Am I not right? So the day the mother deer or the mother antelope took its babies out, that was the first time they saw the tiger or the lion and saw its behavior. It can run a mile in 9 seconds, grab other animals and tear them into pieces. And the mother deer said, wow, that is a superior animal. What does that mean to the baby deer? Will you ever do that? So the baby deer is inferior for the rest of its life? That's what you've done with your countries. You're comparing your country, and the day you knew your country was not developed is because you look at another country where the people who live it, who build it, have nothing in common with you. When I say that no black country would ever develop, I meant the basic things that is required, the 4-pillar foundation that you find in every developed country. But there is no developed country. There are only 2 types of countries on earth: industrialized countries and non-industrialized countries. So if I tell you, Ghanaian Africans, your people are underdeveloped, Ghanaians are underdeveloped, would you accept it?
No.
How about you?
No.
Then how can a place, there's no place, you can't have a country without people. So how did you call the country itself underdeveloped, yet claim that the people who live in it are developed?
It's because of the infrastructure.
No, but what I'm saying is, if the people were developed, shouldn't they build what they're supposed to build?
But it's the resources as well, the lack of resources.
What resources do you lack? There are only 4 resources. I'll come to it and tell you, you have plenty of it than anybody else on earth.
True.
So you see, the comparison is when you began to know that your country. But the 4 pillars of the 4-pillar foundation required in any developed industrialized country, no black country has it. Those are, you know what is WASP? W-A-S-P. White, the race. Anglo-Saxon, the ethnicity. Protestants, the religion, and their history. Right?
So is it when they came to colonize our continent and then left?
I'm saying that is a 4-pillar foundation. Japanese, the language, the ethnicity, they're Japanese. The history, they are Meiji.
And then their religion.
Their religion. Germans, Lutherans, The English are Anglicans. They are WASP. They are formerly a Germanic tribe that occupy what we call now the UK or the English land, England. Okay? China, you see it, even though you have pockets of different tribes. They all speak Mandarin. They are all from the Ming Dynasty. They all share the same religion and the same history. Let me ask you, who is a Nigerian?
I would say someone who's born there, or someone who's well, parents are from there or raised
So
there.
what is Nigerian culture?
It varies because in
Okay,
Nigeria,
so the answer is there's no such thing. What do Nigerians speak?
multiple languages.
There's no such thing. What is the value, sense of value of Nigeria as a culture? There's no such thing. What is the history of Nigeria? There is no such thing unless you start from 1960 when we gained independence. Yet the Igbos have been around that place more than 900 years. The Benin Kingdom have been around that place close to 1,000 years. The Yoruba Empire has been around close to 1,000 years. But when you say what is a Nigerian culture, Nigerian history, you can only start from 1960.
So are you saying is the people's fault that we're not developing even back then? Is it?
No, we haven't even come to the point of whether you are developing or not developing. I'm just simply saying the 4-pillar foundation that is required for people to say this is ours and this is the dream. Since you were born, have you seen a blueprint by your ancestors that says this is where Ghana is going, and by the year 2040 Ghana will be this? Have you seen it?
Not exactly, but they have their plans.
Who is they?
Well, I see it in the news on the government.
News, but I'm saying, what is Ghanaian blueprint? Have you seen the Constitution of America? It says clearly what they are going to be. How about Nigeria? No.
No.
Exactly. So you don't have a blueprint, like trying to build a house with no architectural plan.
You're muted, Joe.
Dang. All right, let me say that again. All right, we're going to stop it right there before we jump back into it, because, we got to give our commentary and give our thought. And I got to drive this conversation to where I wanted to go for us. So welcome to Breakdown Friday. You already know what it is. We love everybody who tune in to us. I'm Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones. Make sure you like this video, comment, subscribe, share. Hey, support us. We have been doing this for about 2 or 3 years, and we've been driving this thing forward. We're going to continue driving, but we need y'all support to continue driving forward so we can not just talk and do these podcasts, but be able to have the resources to make our community better through the actual community action that we do on a regular basis. So, links in the description to support all 3 of us, and we appreciate everybody who has been supporting us. All right, so this is Franck Zanu, and in the beginning of this it's a 47-minute video. In the beginning of the video, he explicitly said no black country, no black nation will ever develop. And he said none of the countries on the continent of Africa, none of the black countries or black people, black nations in the Caribbean, not the United States or anywhere in the world, black nations, black people will never develop. And he's having this conversation with a Ghanaian and a Nigerian student, students that one of them attended the same university he attended. But he's having this conversation and trying to get them to think about what is development and why he believes these African nations will not develop. And I stopped the conversation where it is because he's going to get into his 4 pillars or the 4 resources that he's saying these nations need. But I wanted us to go ahead and start getting into this conversation because he mentioned us as well. We're Black America, so we want to focus on us. So will Black America ever develop? And if Black America will ever develop, how will that happen? What does that look like? What is development? Where are we even in the process of being able to develop? If development is something that is on the table, do we even have any plans for development? All those things that we want to talk about and cover for us, because just take the conversation he was having and just insert Black Americans into it, right? So that's what we're going to do. So Pat, we know you raw dogging, man. So, you're familiar with Franck Zanu. This is your first time seeing this clip. What I played thus far of his giving his assessment of why the Black nations won't develop. What is your overall assessment? Just your first thoughts or your first assessment of what he's talking about. These Black nations not being able to develop.
At first, I am familiar with him. The name rung a bell. I had to Google him while he was talking to see why the name rung a bell.
Mm-hmm.
And it rung a bell because he's a life coach and a motivational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a world I used to exist in. So I'm familiar with him on that level. And I'll be clear and upfront right here. My bias immediately started kicking in because I do not like life coaches and motivational speakers. So just be totally upfront about it. So, but on the face of it, what he was saying in the first part of it, I agree with him that, a lot of the times we're having these conversations about development and we don't have a conversation about the standard that we're using to qualify the statement of right what's developed and what's not. Where I disagree with him on is like a good chunk of what he says to prove the point. From the standpoint of one, like he is right about the deer example, the deer and the fawn example.
Mm-hmm.
The fawn doesn't know that it has inadequacies until it's exposed to those inadequacies.
Right.
But if the fawn lives in the doe or the fawn lives in a world where those inadequacies are never shown, then it never knows that it has them.
Right.
And the same thing exists in culture. Unless you are somebody that is adequately and specifically trained to observe and realize culture, you don't know that you exist in it. And so that's why, looking at him talking to these young students, they can't answer the question of what is Nigerian culture, because for them, it just is.
Right.
We use the analogy all the time, asking a fish to describe water.
Right.
Like, it's just there. So they're not, and we see this in America too, when we ask our kids to describe what is Black culture. They can't tell you
music,
because
food,
they just
fashion
exist in it. So it's not until, but now it's a lot more dangerous for Black people in America to have that view because we're in such close proximity with other cultures that have a negative viewpoint of our culture, which is why it's important. But if you're somewhere like a Nigeria where it's Black people everywhere, your viewpoint might be a little bit different. I'm not saying there aren't different cultures in Nigeria, because of course there are, which brought me to even the Chinese point. There are over 300 languages spoken in China. They don't all speak Mandarin.
Yeah,
they don't all speak.
They all speak Mandarin.
Yeah, they don't all speak Cantonese either. Right. Like there's a bunch of different but again, that's where we get into the cultural blind spots. Most people that aren't Chinese don't know that.
Right.
So it's one of those things where we have to be careful about how we're talking and the analogies we're using and how we're specifically when we're talking about talking to young people about the things that need to be had. Those young people, now that they have experienced a world that they think is superior to theirs, you can no longer come to them and tell them there's nothing wrong with your world. They're not going to accept it.
Right.
They've seen what they have already defined as better. So young people like that, you got to wonder, is it worth the energy to try to get through to them in terms of that sort of mindset transformation, or do we approach it a different way? It's the same thing going on here in America. So I think the whole conversation it's a very interesting conversation. I agree with him about calling attention to the comparative analysis that's being made there. I disagree with several other points that I'm sure we're going to get into. But on the face of it, I think it's a very productive conversation for Black people to be having.
Right.
I don't know that, and this is, my pessimism peeking its head out. I don't know if it's a conversation we're capable of having.
Well, that's another aspect of it. That's why I want our focus to be on us for this. Because we're talking about how we see ourselves and how we go about expressing that or even building on that or not building on that, because turning the focus on Black America is, giving it a different perspective as far as the conversation, because he's having a conversation with a Ghanaian and a Nigerian. So now we're talking.
And I do want to say this too, real quick, because it fits into the other things that I said. Nigerian culture starts prior to 1960. I think that frame of reference is a dangerous frame of reference that we see in a lot of modern day Black philosophers.
Well, he talked about the ego in the Yoruba.
Right. So he says that, but he says it after he says the culture started on this. Right. The people existed prior to that, and studying the culture means centering the culture. And when you make a statement like that, the statement is rooted in decentering the culture, because you've centered the culture in the viewpoint or the perspective of the culture that says that you didn't become a people until the 1960s.
Well, that makes me think. So when we talk about us, so when did we become a people?
Good question. Personally,
PC, where the crickets at, man?
Yeah, personally.
I mean, if we talk about in that sense, so right, that's what I'm going. That's what I want us to think. That's what I want us to put our thinking caps on is, okay, development, because we're always talking about building a nation, building something for ourselves. So in the conversation of building for ourselves, what does that look like? Now, PC, coming to you. You have created the Independence Day Project. And the Independence Day Project, the question was, what does Black America look like without white supremacy, outside of white supremacy? So with that being said, with that question being out there, as well as the conversation that's going on, what are your overall thoughts on what he's talking about? But also the piece for you, how do you think the Independence Day Project can help to have some kind of blueprint or some kind of foundational ideas of development?
All right. Well, okay. So I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
Where, in terms of his description and what is, how did you phrase it? What does?
Well, because he said no Black nation will develop.
Okay. That's loaded. No, it is, because in terms of development, I think we put too much, because even when he says it like that, he's actually juxtaposing it to the development of the Western world.
So you're saying he's doing the same thing he accused them of doing?
Well, yeah. In a nutshell, because when you say it can never be done, and I watched the whole clip, so I kind of know where he's going with the rest of it, but I'll just talk about this. When you say it, I mean, actually, it was actually a show, it wasn't even a clip, but when you actually say that we can't be developed, it speaks to generating sort of like it's basically saying that there's not going to be a transition or progression or progression of your people and your culture and who you can be. When it comes to nations, if and I don't want to give too much because I know we're going to get into some of the other things he talks about, but modernization is kind of how you stay with the rest of the world in terms of, especially if you're going to be part of the global society at large. So to say that they won't develop, I think that's well, to say that they can't develop or will never develop, you know, that's pretty dark.
That's strong.
Yeah. Now I do agree that we're going to have to form some type of identity, cohesive identity that separates us from the colonized identity we have now. But as we've been saying on this particular show for the longest, we have to accept the fact that we're no longer really Africans. I mean, we're connected to the African diaspora, but we are our own set. We are the newest form of Black people on the planet. Here in America, the different groups that we come from, the different tribes, the different nations, the fact that we do have some Native American and European blood in us, the fact that our culture, the culture that we came from, the cultures that we came from, we were robbed and stripped of even knowing where we're from and having any connection to it. Now, you can speak to the spiritual connections, but that's another conversation. But in terms of being able to talk about the lineage and the family tree, most people, specifically, if you are a direct descendant of enslaved Africans here, most of our lineage, you can't really go back past 1850 for the most part, for the majority of us. Now, there's some who can, but for the majority of us. So the Black experience here in America is about resetting or creating that culture, that common bond, that common thread that will, you know, make us form and think in a uniform fashion, develop more ways and folkways that can sort of like be the foundation of culture, which we struggle with because too many times we often hear from people in the Black community that we're not a monolith. Well, to be a nation, you kind of have to be a monolith in some way, shape, or form. Like the bottom line of who you are has to be the commonality that you share.
That's one of the things he was explaining about the different, like about the Chinese and where he was trying to go with the Chinese and the other groups of people he was explaining.
Yeah, well, he was basically stating that their pillars is based in their language, their history,
that commonality.
Right. So this is the one thing they can tie to. And we have too many people who reject it because they want to just be Americans and they don't want to deal with this. I mean, you even saw the Menace to Society when Sharif tried to pop the tape in Tracy's car and he said, man, get that Black Power shit out my ride. The Black Power shit gets no play in my ride. You know what I'm saying? So you can see the tensions that arise with that conversation even within. And so and then who's gonna follow? These days everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody sees themselves as the next coming of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So you know, so they got that. Now you're talking about how we can the purpose for the Independence Day Project was because if you like we're having this conversation now, if you ask 10 different Black nationalists, people who have an interest in building a Black nation here, what their vision or version of what that would look like, you would get 10 different answers.
Right.
Well, the Independence Day Project was to actually formulate a cohesive vision as to what it would look like if we built a nation that was free of white supremacy, that was built by us, by us and for us. That was the whole concept of the Independence Day Project. But one of the biggest fallbacks on that is when people realized we were the ones that were going to have to do the work, that we couldn't complain about who we were voting for or who we're going to be supporting in the upcoming election. When we weren't talking about, we never even talked about reparations in the Independence Day Project, because I firmly believe that you can only make somebody pay you back if you can make them pay you back.
Key emphasis on make them.
Right. So, man, listen, a bully will leave you rabbit-eared all day. Your pockets will look like rabbit ears all day. That bully owes you reparations. You can't make your plea to the bully, and the bully turns around. You know what? You're right. Let me give you back all this bread I done shook you down for all these years. No, you might have to pull up with a stick, something, to make the bully say, if I don't pay this dude back, he might break something off for me. You know what I'm saying? So, that part is why I think, like, so the vision for the Independence Day Project, if we do it, and if we take over those areas of human activity that this was loosely based on, Elder Lily Fuller, Dr. Francis Cress Wilson talked about, if we can control those, if we can recite or go back to group economics like Dr. Claude Anderson speaks on, if we can start talking about how group economics helps build the power in your house, if we can do with as Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about creating the foundations of your nation, you have to be able to create, you have to be able to control the means of production, you have to be able to control labor for a labor force, you have to be able to control food and housing, and you have to be able to protect it. If we can do those things, then hell yeah. But the problem is we just don't have enough solid people to do it. We have too many snakes in the garden, and we're afraid to eradicate or remove the snakes because one of us might be cool with the damn snake. So how can we say, okay, this person, based on their values, based on their lack of character, they need to go, but somebody like, brother, do we have to, I mean, can't we find a way? No, we can't find a way. They got to go. But we don't have the gumption to even do that. So we don't have the gumption to clean our own houses. Then we're a far cry from being able to say we can be a nation. And then we keep leaving out the fact that we have a healthy, well, I don't know how healthy the enemy is, but we have an enemy that seems to have a lot of resources that are hell bent on making sure we never become one.
And
we can't get to them until we get to the army of Negroes that are standing in the way.
Well, yeah.
So, the Independence Day Project feels like a pipe dream at this point. But hey.
Well, that's why I do agree with him. But I would say I don't think Black America would develop anytime soon. I'm not going to put the ever on there, but I am going to say anytime soon in the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 generations. I don't see that happening.
It can happen only if America collapses. If America collapses, but then
that's the external catalyst. That's some kind of external force. It's still not us doing, because if America collapses, still what would make us say, all right, let's do something for ourselves?
So, but when we say develop, right? Like, and something else just popped in my head. I'm sorry. I'm still processing the last little bit of what we watched. And this is the joke, and that I find funny. I don't think he knows why doctors ask, when did it start? And that's just based on the bit of rambling he did after he said that. The origin date of the problem is important because you need to know the events that occurred around the origin date.
Right.
Those things can be critical for helping you diagnose what the problem is. I think the Black community in America, I would say our origin date is probably sometime in the early 1600s when we first started showing up here on American soil as captives. And so that's important because now we can look at the environment around our inception and figure out, okay, well, what's going on here and what sort of course or direction has this put us on? And so from that frame of reference, it becomes a matter of like qualifying development. Is the black community going to develop? Well, yeah, it's community. It's going to develop, but is it going to develop in a way that's beneficial to black people?
Right.
Well, that gets a little bit dicey because then we got like what's beneficial for, because the way we're developing now is real beneficial for niggas.
Which in turn is beneficial for white supremacy, but it is beneficial for niggas.
Right. So it's like, all right. So now we're carving it out even further because we're talking about what I believe to be an ever shrinking subset of Black America. Like I do believe, like people that think the way that I think, the way you think, Joe, the way you think, PC, like we're dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Like I don't think they're making any more models of us. I don't like when I look out at the kids in the schools and I'm working with them on a daily basis. I'm like, yeah, I feel like a 8-track.
Last of a dying breed.
Yeah, talking to a bunch of MP3 players, telling them how to produce good sound, and they looking at me like you can only hold 4 songs. I could hold thousands. So, but it's like it is going to, but what is it going to develop into? And so that's where the conversation gets to be very nuanced because it's like, all right, well, what do Black people want to develop into?
Well, it goes back to what do we define as development, and what does development actually look like for us?
I think we have to define what is Black people.
Well,
yes,
I mean, but going back to what I'm saying, like we got a lot of work to do. So anytime, I don't see positive, productive development anytime soon. I say that.
No, well, it's when it's the standard, it's going to be impossible to do that because anytime you press anybody to move forward in our community, the common fallback is if we progress too much, you're trying to be white. If you move in this direction, well, everybody can't be you, or and then it comes to the fact that everybody want to prove how hood they are. Everybody want to prove how connected to the ghetto we are, instead of deciding that let's eliminate the ghettos, let's eliminate those things. I mean, we still got silly like check-ins when you have to go to another city. You know what I'm saying? So, when you have those, I mean, ain't making none of the white celebrities check in. I'm just saying.
They not.
So, and then we, everybody in the Black community is not a criminal, but everybody ascribes to a criminal concept, a criminal mindset. So, you see crime, you can't even tell. The innocent civilian can't even tell that, such and such did such and such or whatever, because you're a snitch. Listen, fam, I understand that we have a don't tell the cops rule, and that goes back to slavery, the plantation, stuff like that. But when you have situations where you are afraid to come out of your house, that's not a situation you can be productive in.
Right.
When you can't, and because I get on the brother, oh man, we don't need cops in our neighborhood. I said, well, who's going to stop the thugs and criminals? Because y'all ain't going to do it. Y'all scared of them. Y'all won't even go talk to them.
Right.
So PC, you might be at your limit.
Okay, let me stop. I was cussing. I forgot.
Look at Pat being on point.
No, I saw Joe scribbling constantly.
I had Joe writing in cursive.
Joe can't even look up no more.
Oh, my bad. I had to. That was, but that's
you good.
So I get frustrated about this because I know that our survival as a people depend on our ability to understand the need to be nation, the nation build.
Hey,
and the people who've given me the most pushback are the people that I've been trying to say, we need to build a nation with.
Well,
and even when I'm not talking to them, they find some way to weasel their way into the conversation to be disruptive when I'm not even freaking talking to them. about building. I want to talk to the common folk. I don't even know how you found us in this dark corner in the other end of the world. Like, I left you all the way over there somewhere. How did you even find us? And we over here trying to come together and build on the concepts and start doing some grassroots work. You want to throw a monkey wrench in everything. It's like, damn it. You don't even have to be paid these days to sabotage black people trying to build something.
Well, I'm just saying, you helping my argument.
Compensated.
You helping my argument, but let's let's go a little further in this because he about to say some more about these resources.
Two, you don't have the 4-pillar foundation required. Let me ask you, the 63 black countries in the world, do you know any black country where the people who live in it founded it? By founding, I mean a group of people like the Yoruba kingdom moving around and came upon a land that is fertile, has what they want, and they settled there. Even if they have to kill the indigenous and steal their women, they did, and they made it into a republic. Is there such a thing on earth? A place, a country, where the blacks who live in it were the ones who founded it? The Caribbean, the 13 black countries, Africa has 54 of them put together, the largest race on earth by number of countries. Which black country do you know where the people who live in it founded it?
I just know one that was.
Who founded Ghana? Which Ghanaian founded Ghana?
Kwame Nkrumah.
No. British founded Ghana and gave it to him when he was complaining too much. He needs independence.
So, I mean, well, I started right there because getting into found the foundational stuff, right? That he's talking about being able to found the land or the country that you exist on, because if not, that means you were given it or you were brought to it and somebody else created it and you were existing within something else. So in terms like, aren't all black people in a sense behind enemy lines? I mean, I know we are like directly behind enemy lines, but in a sense of if we're not creating and founding these countries for ourselves, wouldn't that mean like all black people are behind enemy lines?
Yeah. I think that if I'm hearing him right, is that you claim it and then you name it.
Right.
You know, so I'm not going to necessarily say, because I think a thing he's alluding to but not speaking to is the Berlin Conference. And one aspect of it, in the colonization and the realignment and renaming of African, you know, the continent geographically, to benefit the European countries that wanted to colonize and strip it of its resources. So when he speaks to that, everywhere else he's talking about on the planet are places that black people were brought to.
Right.
So from that perspective, I guess you could say that. But you have to also look at the governance of those places that he's speaking to.
Right.
They're still under colonization.
Right.
They still have to answer to European power brokers who still have controls over their economies and their political systems, their treaties and their abilities to trade, their tariffs and things of that nature. So I guess when you look at it like from that perspective, yeah. I mean, what? And I'm trying to find a counterpoint to it. I'm trying to find a counter because I know he goes into it a little bit deeper. Because what I see him doing is challenging these young people to think outside the box.
Right. I like that part.
Yeah. So go ahead, Pat.
No, I was letting you cook.
I mean, I was just, I was just burning a little warm. I was toasting. I don't know if I was cooking. It was some toasting.
You were warming it
I'll
up.
say this. I do like, I love watching young people be challenged. And so in that, I am enjoying him challenging the young people. I would like, this is personal preference, of course, because I'm talking about what I like. I would like for him to let them sit in it a little bit longer. Like instead of like bringing up point after point after point, You know what I'm saying? But I like to give young people a chance to really sit in something and think about it and just be patient. But I get the content.
He African. They're gonna get peppered with questions. So, you know.
Well,
what are you doing?
So, but I think I get his point, especially the way PC illustrates it and your question. I do think the point is once again based in white European standards of foundations. I don't know that the point actually matters in terms of even if there was a black country that was founded by black people who went to another land, killed all the people that are settled on it and took it over for themselves, which is in large part and in a lot of ways not modern. It's not really black people's MO.
Right.
In that sense, in the way he presents it. And I'm not saying black people haven't sworn they stick around because they have.
Well, if you watch this channel, we've been reading Destruction of Black Civilization. So we should have a healthy understanding of how these African empires expanded. So.
Right. Okay. So but so that whole standard, but even with that, right now, the power structure globally is white. And it's in the middle of transitioning to Asian.
Right.
And Chinese to be specific, or Russian, but they're considered Asian too. So with geography, anyways. So it doesn't matter the individual country because the power broker is the global power. So that's why I say it so if those 60 plus countries he's pointing out were founded by black people native to those lands, but the power structure was still white supremacy, what's the difference?
Well,
there isn't one. So it's a point for the sake of making a point. Like it's a point for the sake of challenging them, which is why I like it. But in terms of the structural argument that we're having, the power that runs the globe is the power that runs the globe. The entire globe is theirs. Everybody that's not a part of their power structure is behind enemy lines. It doesn't matter if it's your grandma's house or a house you just bought 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. So then we get into the conversation of governance. Who runs those countries now? And how long have they been in power in those countries? Because if the answer is more than a few decades, they had enough time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can no longer, like if a country just popped up and they were in chaos, say South Sudan in the 90s, just popped up, and we try and figure out what's going on there. All right, cool. But if you've been around since 1950, 1960, and we in the year of our Lord 2025, and you still ain't figured it out, you can't blame that on the white man any more than a child that got slapped in the face when he was 9 years old, and now as a 62-year-old man can blame being slapped in the face for why he's still out here in this world doing crazy stuff.
Well, that's why I asked what I asked. So yeah. But.
No, because Pat makes a good point. I mean, you're dealing with right now rulers without borders.
Right.
So, this whole concept, I mean, we speak about white supremacy. We don't just call it American supremacy. We call it white supremacy because it spans beyond the borders of, the United States of America. And when you talk about especially people who are buying into the global banking systems and the getting caught up in austerity, those are things that push past the actual outlining of your governance in many cases. So you pretty much, especially if you're I'm just going to go to this point. I believe Nigeria over the last year or so made a push to move France out of their country, the French influence out of their country. So what happened was the NATO forces and the other Western powers got together and had a conversation with, I believe it was Nigeria, to put pressure on Nigeria.
Yeah, they did.
To back off and allow the French back to having access to their resources. We know without Nigeria and the uranium, the source of uranium, half of France would be in darkness.
Yeah, and Burkina Faso got involved in that as well.
Yeah, so you see what's going on here. And so that's the global impact. Now, what I would say is if these African nations ever decided that they were going to form one block and did business a certain way, and I'm even including, you know, under the Pan-African umbrella that Malcolm X was trying to put together in 1965, and then we all applied that type of pressure collectively and cohesively, then you might see a change. But I would say this: the number one wild card that these other cats have is access to the very powerful military structure that and the ability to deal with immoral factions and within the structures we're trying to build. So you got the corrosion and the corruption and the cancer from inside, and then you have the military might of the Western nations that don't give a damn about bombing anything in Africa.
Well,
I mean, they didn't give a damn about bombing anything here in Philly in 1985.
That's another barrier to development.
So, but you got to be, if you want it, you have to be able to accept that.
I get it, but you got to be able to bring it too.
Yeah, well, sometimes if you have the will to do something, then the perseverance of you having the will to do something means that you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice as long as the sacrifice is in alignment with the thing you're trying to build.
Say it loud for the people in the back.
Well, you have to have the will. I mean, we joke about you know, the Marvel comic series and especially Endgame and you know, but when Thanos was talking about things, I don't think people grasp the concept of why he saw Tony Stark as his greatest nemesis, not the Hulk, not Captain America. You know, he saw Tony Stark as his greatest nemesis because he realized Tony Stark was the only one who matched his will.
Yep.
So it didn't matter who else was up against him. Tony Stark was his nemesis. You have to be a nemesis to those who made you an enemy.
Shaka Zulu.
And yeah, you got to have the will. And even if you go down, you know, with your shield intact, you become the inspiration for generations to come. But you got to have the will to see it through.
Yep. And
when you have the will, cowards back down. Now they might say, "Hell, we'll burn the whole world before we let you have your piece of it." But you've already burnt our world anyway. So what do we really have here? And I think, Pat, you were talking a week ago. You were talking about how one of the HBCUs, went to one of like the virtual meetups in one of the HBCUs in your area. And the young people that were at the HBCUs, and these are the proud future members of future leaders of Black America, right? But the things they were talking about was they didn't want to be tied to the whole concept of having to be there for the people.
Right.
How they wanted to just live their best life.
Right. Right.
Upon graduating from college. Now, if that's the best and the brightest, and they're talking about seeking a way to abandon any sort of commitment or responsibility to the future of their people. And then you have the people who are so busy in the grassroots talking about foundation that they lack the vision for the future.
Hey.
You got people who are scrambled and they're warring each other we're gonna have somebody in his comments talking about you're not black. Black is a crayon. You know, we're gonna have somebody doing that.
Every video, somebody talking about black is not a color. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, they're gonna spam the they probably have already spammed the you know, the chat box already. So the bottom line is, you know, with all this disarray and confusion and so forth, this whole notion of ever even being a threat to the power structure that will ever give us the ability to have them just back off so we can develop out of our own autonomy.
It's not gonna happen.
That shit ain't, it's not gonna happen it's not gonna happen.
Well, yeah.
We've been trained good. We've been colonized good. Even to the point where even his description is colonizer descriptions for black liberation and independence. So,
and I want to say one thing real quick before you move on, Joe. I fully recognize that, like, his perspective, like, I see it, I can appreciate it. I just don't agree with it. Just like I'm sure he doesn't agree with us, because we've used white supremacy and globalization a lot. And when I was Google searching to figure out who he was, that was like his number one thing that popped up was he doesn't believe white supremacy exists.
Right.
So, and you know, I was able to scan a few quick things. I understand why he says that, but I also understand there's still a fundamental philosophical difference in the way I see the world versus the way he sees the world. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I am saying that it's different. So, you know, for any Franck Zanu fans that might pop up, not disrespecting the guy, I just don't agree with his worldview.
Smoke.
Yeah. Let's move on a little bit.
But that was
who founded Nigeria? Which
I actually did not know.
That's correct, because no Nigerian founded Nigeria. The Benin Kingdom founded Benin Kingdom. Oduduwa founded the Yoruba. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'm talking about Nigeria.
But I see what you're saying. Okay, what about like Ethiopia, a country that was never colonized?
Sierra Leone was never colonized.
Sierra Leone?
Yes, they just pulled back slaves. So what? It doesn't mean anything. Still, their country was carved by the Europeans. So how do you expect that a people can build something they did not design? I'm trying to lead you slowly. Your conclusion, not mine, but all the people who are going to listen, because you guys are going to become members of parliament in the future. You are going to be the leaders of this continent. If you want to go back, you need to have something in your mind to say, this is what is wrong and I want to change it. Otherwise, we are all going to be swimming in the dark for the rest of our lives.
Did I just like hear what I thought I heard? Like, I'm getting ready to transition so that I can get in the car and get moving. And I heard that and I was like, wait a second, hold on. Did he just undo his whole argument?
What do you mean by saying they will become future leaders of parliament?
Well, that whole transition, like if I was sitting chilling by myself, I would have ran that whole thing back, because it started with the whole Sierra Leone, that whole comment, and then, you know, he was like, it doesn't matter that they would never colonize. Joe, you muted.
Yeah, he was talking about, because the question, the gentleman mentioned Ethiopia, and then he didn't acknowledge it. He just said, well, Sierra Leone was never colonized. They just rolled back the slaves.
Right. And then he said it doesn't matter.
Right.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole assertion he made, what he was alluding to in certain lights and certain veins, when he said, name me a black country that was founded by black people, isn't a bit of that assertion undone when they bring up Sierra Leone never being colonized and he says it doesn't matter?
And Ethiopia, yeah, because Ethiopia, I mean, if they were never colonized by outsiders, by the Arabs, the Europeans, or even Asians, they were never colonized by them. But African people would have founded it, and you know, so that does break that.
Yeah. So that I don't like. Like, this is not a difference of opinion. This is like, okay, because now, like, and this is what motivational speakers do. They talk out of both sides of their face.
Well, he's also, whatever argument he has that says that white supremacy doesn't exist, and his explanation of this, he's killing that.
But then he goes on to say they're going to be the future. All right, I know we short on time, but that little segment right there,
yeah,
there was a lot there. Like, if we would have started with that, we would probably be an hour in still talking about that. Because So if there are any Franck Zanu fans in the comments now, all right, now I'm looking at y'all sideways. Like, and maybe I'm just not understanding what I just heard. I'm gonna go back and listen to it again later, but that seemed like it broke a lot of his earlier points, and it seemed like he dismissed what was said because he didn't want to take the time to consider another perspective.
Because he's trying to drive them to a specific perspective, to a specific answer that he wants them to get to.
Right. So he's not really pushing them then.
Right.
He's pulling them.
And manipulating.
Right. So now the whole conversation is colored different. Now he might as well be.
That's why we do these breakdowns. That's why we do.
All right, all right. I'm sorry. My bad, y'all.
I'll let it play a little more.
No. That was a good point. That was a great point, actually, in terms of the juxtapose of the switch. Because I thought about that too when I saw that with the Ethiopian piece, but you know, because he never addressed the Ethiopian part.
Yeah,
Ethiopia was never conquered. They may have lost the war. I think they lost the war in World War II. They were initially defeated by the Italians before the end, of World War II. But they were never colonized unless when you talk about Sally Struthers over there eating up all the food. But
in the arms
that was that I see what he's doing, but like Pat said, he's trying to form and shape, and he's trying to create a path of least resistance to get to a point where he's trying to get to.
But he's also talking to students.
That part, young people who are not really don't have the capability to challenge them.
Well, but like Pat is saying, because he seemed like he's trying to be in the business of developing the thought processes of the young people. So if you're actually going to be in the business of developing the thought processes of the young people, you have to direct them to their own conclusions, not direct them to your conclusion.
Oh, I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah.
Because that becomes you become the prophet of propaganda.
Right. Because he stated and he said that he's trying to direct them to their own conclusion, but no, because every time they're giving you something, you redirecting it. But but we're gonna let it play a little more though.
Our lives. No black country on earth will become industrialized. Impossible. You said resources. People keep complaining and telling you that the reason African countries can develop is because the white people stole the resources. It's a lie. There are 4 resources nobody can steal. Water is one of them. Did you see tanks from Britain taking all your water away? No. Fela sang a song in 1981. Water house, food house. Hey, Palipao, waiting to them, right? 1981. Do you know how many years ago? He was complaining about there is water overground. The Niger River goes through Nigeria. No Nigerian can get a cup of water, pure one, from his pipe in his own room. You have tanks on every building. That's one. They didn't take it away. The second one is land. The colonials didn't take it away. You have vegetative land in Nigeria. If Japan own it, they will feed half of the world with food export. The third one, solar energy. 365 days, we don't get winter, we don't get spring, we don't get autumn. It's there. Have you harvested it? You go build an electric car. When you can't even give people electricity in their homes in Burkina Faso, what are you going to use to charge? You understand? So solar, that's the third one. So the fourth one is, of course, manpower resources, okay? From the intellect into physical. They didn't take it away. So all four things that help other countries to build themselves, you have it. You have it more than anybody.
Like I hear what he's saying, but he's not listening to himself when he's saying that, right? Because water, people, and land are controlled by the colonizers. He said it. They don't even have access to running water, right? Water, people, and land have been colonized. The ability to harvest solar energy has been colonized. And this goes back to the conversation we was having before we started recording about how the messenger matters. I don't care how good the message is. The messenger matters, right? Or how good it sounds, because you really got to be able to break it down and think about it. Because yes, the people still live on the land. Yes, the people still use water, and yes, the people are still there, but they are all under the control of the colonizers. And I would love for him to give us an example of how to use water, people, and land and solar energy to build a foundation for development.
Well, you have to have access. First of all, this totally, well, now, because I didn't know much about the guy until Pat started talking about who he, looking him up as a what is it, kind of a freaking
a motivational speaker.
Motivational speaker, yeah. Motivational speaker. But when you come from the perspective that white supremacy doesn't exist, then you sort of like eliminate the concepts of austerity. And if you want to know what austerity would look like, look at all the things that's going on right now in this country with all of the damn budget cuts, because America is in so much debt that if any of those countries decided to have a margin call on those debts, America would then be under austerity.
Yeah.
Because America itself, within other parts of the world, will own parts of America, and then there would be parks named after different countries. There would be certain parts of the country that would be owned by other entities that didn't that are not American, that are from other countries, just based on that. So I think we really need to pay attention to how this is used, because the manpower, like you said, with the manpower, one of the things we have to consider is who controls the resources, or who controls the manufacturing. So you can talk about solar panels all you want, but there's no solar panel plants in Africa where they're actually building and designing solar plants.
Well, so you watched the whole video, right? Because he's like all over the place, and that's why I'm glad I did a little bit of research before we start the show. So in the beginning of the video, remember when they were talking about development in Burkina Faso, and they went to Burkina Faso developing the Ayatollah, the solar, the EV car, the electric vehicle, and it talked about that's what the students was telling him, that this electric vehicle was developed in Burkina Faso by the people of Burkina Faso, and he told them it wasn't true. And now the young man didn't help his argument by saying that he heard this that he learned this information off of Instagram. Because all you got to do is Google, right? Use Google, do your research, like research the car company, research the manufacturers. Everything that I've come across stated that this was manufactured and built in Burkina Faso. So he was adamant about Burkina Faso didn't do this. Now, I'm not sure if the car is driving around or people have bought them and all these things, but all the information I came across did show that an electric vehicle was developed by the people of Burkina Faso and manufactured in Burkina Faso. So that's just one of the examples of him kind of being all over the place. But him, Pat, you You helped it out by reminding us that he was a motivational speaker.
I think and so I'm glad both of you guys popped in on this piece because I was real anxious to hear how he was going to do the whole.
Oh, you know, I had to
four
let you I had to
the whole 4 resources piece. I've been curious about that since he brought it up. And then he lists 4 resources that can absolutely be controlled.
Right.
Like the way you guys just added out. I mean, here's another example of a great resource that is being controlled by power that has no control over itself. When we talk about microchips, TSMC is a Taiwanese-based country. According to his argument, by virtue of them basically holding the globe hostage to his microchip plant facilities, they should be in a position of power. But they're getting slapped around by China all the time. They're in the middle of a fight right now for their independence. And they're begging other countries, not begging because that's disrespectful, but they're asking other countries to come to bat for them and to stand up to China if they declare their independence. So even with that, like, do you understand means of production? Do you understand intellectual capacity? Do you understand resources required to put these things together? Yeah, nobody owns solar. Nobody can stop you from seeing the sunlight unless they put you in a hole and don't put no windows and mirrors in it, nothing like that. But they can absolutely control and limit your ability to transform that sunlight into something usable. They can do that. They can absolutely limit your ability to gain access to the water in any sort of usable form. They can do that. Because now I'm looking at Buddy and I'm like, all right, you are an op. And I knew it. I knew you were an op. I knew as soon as I read motivational speaker, I translate that well. I speak fluent op. All right, I'm gonna land my plane.
But now, I mean, I love the conversation. I love the conversation that he's having because it's one that needs to be had as far as putting brain power to it. Like, what the hell is really development, and are we really capable of doing it? But he has to know what he's talking about the full time, and he's grilling the hell out of them, and it's a good conversation. Of course, I like that because we love to see young people be challenged, but he need to be challenged as well.
I'd love to see a part 2. Just I would love to see him sit down with those students and have that conversation again in a year or 2.
Yeah.
Because so it's like when you think you know more than somebody else, you believe you can talk circles around them. And we know that in many African customs that there's a level of respect that an elder gets from the young people. So I think he also played on that. And the conversation started off seeming genuine.
Yeah.
Like I said, I watched the whole conversation. And I get kind of where he was doing in terms of having the conversation with them. But I also looked at it too is this is a show for him. This is his show. So it's not necessarily something where you can draw from in terms of like actual accuracy, because I don't see the accuracy here. Like, and I told y'all before, I saw another clip of his that I totally disagreed with earlier prior to us coming on the air. But yeah, he's definitely playing games with words and in terms of trying to sort this out, because the one thing I did miss when I watched it earlier, and I think because somebody was having a side conversation with me when it came on, was the 4 resources that he was talking about. So the ones he talked about were things that are easily manipulated and controlled. Shit. Yeah, there were more black people in America at one point than anybody else but they were all identified as slaves. So, I mean, and they were doing a hell of a lot of labor, you know, to the point where they couldn't only, they were only identified as 3/5 of a person or 3/5 of a man. So, the notion that you can control those things, but you need the outside world to bring them to you. I mean, he's talking about solar resources. Well, wasn't China the one that first sponsored solar farms in Africa? Where was the singer?
You got to have access to it. You got to have access to harvest it.
Right. So it's not like they have African solar energy companies over there.
I mean, but like going back to what Pat's saying, yeah, but Buddy is aggressive and all that stuff, but he is talking out of both sides of his neck on a lot of stuff that he's talking about, because it seems like he's not necessarily really knowledgeable of it, but aggressive in his approach, in his questioning. And so it could come off as he's an authority figure on it, especially talking to college students who don't really know no better.
Right. And that's unfortunate. Because this was a time where he really could have taken this opportunity to really school these young folk. And I don't know. I mean, I think they left that. I think when I saw them at the end of the clip, they looked more confused than anything else. So
they probably would.
Because I mean, it still was a good lesson for them.
Yeah.
In terms of actually making them think about some of the things. I'm pretty sure, especially if they watch this clip, they'll have some more ammo the next time they see him.
Hey, know what you're talking about. But also sit down and think. Like I tell people all the time, one of the young ladies in my Black History school, I love that every time you ask her a question, she's going to think about it. You know, take her time and think about it and then give you the answer. I love that. More people need to do that. Like, don't just rush to give an answer. Think about it, process it, and then respond, so you can make sure you have a good response. Know what you say and say what you know. And if you don't know, say you don't know.
Crazy work.
But don't act like you know either. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, man. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the conversation development of Black Americans? Will Black America ever develop? And if so, when? And what is development? Like, you all join this conversation, get in the comments and go ham. I want to see paragraphs for this. This the one video I want to see, these paragraph comments. Like, I want to know what you all think, and drop it in these comments and let's do this thing, man. Y'all make sure y'all support FetLifeStation.com. If you're not supporting FetLifeStation.com, I don't know what you're doing. You ain't no real PC fan, right? Make sure you support thepax.org. Support Pat. If you're not going to thepax.org, you're not a real Pat fan. And if you're not going to ontheshoulders1.com, then you ain't no real Joseph Ward fan. And I know that ain't true. So y'all make sure y'all do what y'all do. Thank you all for the support. And if you would like to support us, all that information is in the description. And we're going to keep this train rolling. We love you all, and make sure y'all catch the next video coming up.